Hey there, and thanks for your interest in the Elemental Balancing Program. If you give me a few minutes here, I'll try and bring this abstraction of the concept of elements into a more relatable point of view or way to see it. So the elements have been traditionally associated with four key aspects that we can tangibly see in the environment, and yet commonly don't comprehend how it is that our body is also a composition of those elements. And so the elements are 1, earth element, 2, water element, 3, fire element, and 4 is the air element. There is also traditionally recognized the 5th element, space, ether, or the space that the other elements exist within. If you look out into space, for example, you can see there's a sun, there's planets and so forth. So they exist in a space, don't they? So within that space there is also energy moving. Of course, the light's coming from the sun to the earth. It demonstrates that space is not entirely empty. There's energy within it, and so that is considered the 5th element. But as it relates to the earth environment, what we can clearly see when we look out the window, particularly if you're on the seashore, you can see this, is that there is a solidity to the earth. That is the earth element. We stand upon it, don't we? So that solidity gives us a very tangible kind of mass-to-mass interaction. And yet if we move up the scale of density, or reducing density rather, we come to the fluid element, which rests upon the earth element, doesn't it? So the ocean, the waters of the lakes, rain and so forth, it ends up sitting on top of the earth element because it's a little less dense. We can jump into the water, although there's still a physicality of it that you can certainly feel if you jump from a height. You can whack into the water with quite a force. Your body can pass through it, obviously. That is called swimming, isn't it, or diving. And yet that is not possible with the earth element, which is a lot more solid to touch, physical, soil, stone, metal and so forth. And so if we look yet again above the fluid element or the water element, what we see upon the earth is that there's an atmosphere, isn't it? And where we see the wind moving, we see the clouds, we can see an exchange between the water coming down in the form of rain. And so you can see that these elements are sort of moving, and there's an interplay between them that is creating this environment that we have. Now it might seem like, oh, I've skipped one out there, and apparently I did, the fire element. It's a little less tangible to note in the environment, unless of course you come across a natural blaze that has been set fire, perhaps due to the heat of the sun. In Australia this happens quite a lot, and we get these bushfires, which is very dangerous. But what is perhaps more commonly relatable is that every time there is a thunderstorm, you see lightning moving through the atmosphere. And so it is not just fire that we can relate to in terms of putting logs on a fire, sitting at a light and using it to cook food, for example, but the electricity is also a way in which the fire element expresses itself, and perhaps is a little even more related to our own physical body, because electricity moves through our physical body as well in the form of our nervous system. And it is this aspect, this fire element, that is critically important, because our brain is connected to the rest of our body, our tissues, our organ systems and various muscles and so forth. And without the electricity moving through from the brain, through the neurology and meeting these tissues and organs and musculature, we wouldn't be able to move, we wouldn't be able to breathe, we wouldn't be able to digest food. None of these things would operate because it all needs electricity. It runs on the fire element. Just as our equipment in the household also requires electricity, our system runs on electricity too, and our nerves are really just little wires moving through our system that deliver the electricity to the various locations of the body. And so this is where we can start to bridge this sort of abstract concept of earth, water, fire and air, and start to relate to it really. What does that mean though within our own body? So of course we have the physical body, we can relate to that. you can touch it. There's a physicality or a density to it. And we can also recall the common saying, you are what you eat. It's not entirely true, because you're the one that's choosing what to eat. You're the observer within the system, the self. That's what we are, essentially. And yet we are the one that has willpower and that can cause the physical body to take action. One of those actions that we take, often it's compulsive, is eating food, isn't it? And so when you choose to eat food, what you're really doing is taking these creations that the earth has come up with in the various forms of idealistically whole foods, such as what's coming from the animal nature, grazing across the planet, the fauna and flora, so to speak, the fruits and vegetables, the produce that we can also pick off the trees. These are all manifestations of the earth element coming into being, of course, in composition with the other elements as well. And so that when you bring that into your system, then it becomes the very body that we're moving through. So this is of particular importance if there's something not working right within the system, such as illness, disease, and dysfunction, because in modern times we've come up with all these clever ideas, man-made foods, which actually aren't natural, and they do not work within the system because it's a natural system. And so this is one thing that we require to look at. What is the elements that we are putting in on this basic level into the system? If we can't figure out what to put in and what works for the system, we're going to move through suffering and struggle associated with the dysfunction that we've caused from our choices. So needless to say that the physical body also needs to be exercised. It's an important component of dealing with this earth element or physicality. You need to do the right exercises to bring the system into balance so that it's posturally aligned, so that this tension is removed. And this is a very important aspect, coming back to the connection with the electricity moving through the system, because the reason that you feel pain is because the nerve is getting in some way probably squashed or blocked, and often this is due to tension. And so on a very basic level, if you just simply start doing the right stretches, what you'll find is that tension can be resolved. You'll feel a lot more comfortable, and the nerves can reach the areas that need to be done. So that's just to give you a few ideas of how to look after this earth element or physical body. Now, what we can immediately see within the system, we realize this, perhaps most mornings we'd get up and go straight to the toilet to relieve the bladder, and we're releasing fluid, aren't we, in the form of water, urine. And it's also the case that if we get cut, for example, then straight away the fluid is leaking from the body. So the water element is also moving through the system in various forms. Lymphatics would be another one. And this is particularly associated with the diet too, because you could have, for example, a very pure stream or river that is flowing along and looks crystal clear. But the moment that you start dumping your waste into it, it's going to very quickly become cloudy, muddy, dirty, and it's not going to be very appealing. Take that for a simple observation of consideration. Would you want to jump into a river that is dirty and muddy, or would you rather jump into one that's nice and clean and pure? Obvious choice, isn't it? But it's also the case that when we're adding things into the system, think about what you drink every day. What are the things that you are choosing to add to the system in terms of fluids? Are they ideal choices? Are they going to keep the river flowing within us nice and pure? Or are they going to perhaps pollute the system? Because all this is very relevant to not only the basic energetic structures, and we've been observing it in terms of scientific view, this energy, and we look at it, but it's also a subjective, relatable thing as well, because when it comes to the physical body, we very definitely feel that, don't we? We're either comfortable or uncomfortable, we're either in pain or we feel good. But when it comes to the fluid element or the water element within us, this is a high correlation with our emotional state, which is very significantly connected to what we're eating. You will have noticed that when your emotions become a bit unstable, your mood comes low, often the compulsion is, well, how can I prop myself up a little with something from the dietary possibility? And it's going to be perhaps sugar, or you might, if you're feeling tired, you'd go and grab a coffee, for example. That's fluid. It's an amphetamine, like speed and cocaine are also amphetamines. That's why it boosts you up, and yet that's like whipping the horse to get it galloping, that is, i.e. the body, which pushes the adrenal glands into action. They secrete adrenaline and cortisol into your system, which are hormones, stress hormones, which of course do give you energy, and yet what they do is lift you up, but then they dump you back down as well, and so you get a crash from taking in coffee and caffeine and sugar and so forth. And these are all observations that we can see we're adding to the fluid biochemistry environment, to what's circulating through your blood, in other words. And that's going to affect your energy, it's going to affect your mood, therefore it's going to affect your motivation, it's going to significantly determine whether or not you follow through on your goals. I mean, how often, if you think about it for a moment, have you gotten up, felt really energized, and perhaps had an intensely dense breakfast, sausages, eggs, perhaps some sourdough? These are all quite dense forms of energy, and as a result it has a lethargic impact. You were really motivated, but you had breakfast, and now you're starting to feel a bit like, actually I could do with a nap. Maybe what I intended to do can just be pushed back to the afternoon. So I'm sure you can relate to that. And so I'm pointing to this tangible, subjective, relatable fact that as we are adding in these elements in the various forms, be they physical, be they fluid, it's going to directly impact our experience, isn't it? And so as we move up the spectrum here from the earth to the fluid to the fire element, well, this is where it starts to become a little more abstract, because not only is the fire element moving through the nervous system and instructing our body what to do, but it's moving through the brain as a neuroelectric effect that is being pushed by our thoughts, by our volition, our intentions, and so forth. And this is significantly related to our belief systems, for example. And so if you have a belief system that is out of touch with reality, then that's going to create a lot of confusion, delusion, error, frustration, bitterness and resentment. These are emotions that arise out of a misalignment with the reality that's in front of us. And the reality is that it's going to be what it is, regardless of what we think. Oftentimes we will look at reality and we will have an argument with it inside of our own head. We're wrestling with reality, thinking it shouldn't be this way. This person shouldn't behave like that. They should be behaving this way. And so this is just a very commonly relatable example of how our mind goes into a mental wrestling match with reality, and as a result it causes us stress. So not only is that a really uncomfortable and unenjoyable experience, being stressed, but it's actually causing damage to our system, because when you move into a state of stress, what you find is that, well, you might not find it in terms of observational looking under the microscope, although it's there, but that what you can relate to is that it's beginning to create tension within the body, because that's what stress does. And that tension within the body is opposite to relaxation, isn't it? Relaxation is associated with peace. Tension is associated with pain and discomfort. And so we can either move toward a greater state of comfort, ease, peace, and functional harmony in our state of being, in our mind, and general way of interacting with the world, or we can move the opposite way and constantly be in a state of fight or flight, stress, conflict, and just battling against the environment. And who really wants to live out their life feeling like they're always at war with the world? Wouldn't you rather be living in a state of peace and harmony, where you feel like the day is just going with ease and flow? This is really where we want to get to. But if we want to get to that, we have to be willing to check in with this belief structure of ours, the way that we're viewing the world, which is management of the fire element within us. So as we come up the spectrum here and up to the air element here, this is something that people really take for granted. You know, we're very focused on eating and drinking. That's something that we often look forward to and enjoy. And that's because there's a practical reality to that. We're taking in physical food, we're taking in drink. It's fuel, it's energy, isn't it? We need energy. And yet we neglect to know that we're actually taking in energy in every moment by breathing. And this is the greatest and most amazing thing, because this is something that's happening automatically for us. We don't even have to think about it. It just happens. It's free. We don't have to pay for it. It's obviously the most important energy source. Otherwise, how is it that you can go a few weeks without food? You can go at least a few days without water. But how many minutes can you go without air? It's only a couple, isn't it? And you're going to start to get damage in your brain. So this shows us that the air element is so critical to our function and vitality. If you do a first aid, for example, a first aid course, one of the things that you immediately learn is to check for the vital signs. Is the person breathing? This is the first thing. It's the most important thing, because without that, the life within the body is going to be out just within a very short space of time. And yet, how much of the time do we give to actually refining our breathing techniques so that we can become more effective at extracting energy from the air? So that is something that we, of course, need to look at on a social, societal level if we want to learn how to gain greater control over our own system. If we want to balance those elements within us, and so that we can arrive at not only our healthiest state, but our highest performing state. So that gives you a little bit of an insight into what to expect with this elemental balancing program. And when this program was created, it was really designed as a sister program to go with the Lightning Path portal. The Lightning Path is all about activating your genetic potential, and in particular, refining your breathing technique, and a specific breathing technique known as Kriya Pranayama, through which you can actually go beyond those four elements that we've been talking about to the ethereal elements, sunlight, subtle vibrations, and so forth, that you can begin to tap into and draw into your system so that you can get a great advantage and get your system functioning at its highest state. And yet, it's a little bit like a bank account, that process, in that you can learn to bring energy into your system. But if you haven't learned to just be, ceaselessly spending, it doesn't matter how much you bring into your account, you're always going to be coming back to zero, isn't it? Because you need to learn where the energy leaks are. And so in the elemental balancing program, one of the analogies that we use is the symbology of a bucket, in that you can learn to bring more energy into the system. Obviously, eating and drinking is one, just by having a decent sleep's another way, but through meditation, for example, which is learning to manage the air element very effectively and tap into those higher or ethereal elements, you can bring a higher source of energy into the system. And so this is a little bit like you tipping a jug of water into the top of your body bucket. Now, obviously, if you keep on tipping water into a bucket, eventually it's going to fill up, isn't it? So imagine if you filled up your body with energy, you'll be absolutely brimming, you'll have abundance of energy, and you'll be so driven all the time to do what needs to be done that you'll of course get a lot of success. Except that is a process that is easier said than done. And this is why at the bottom of the bucket, often we don't realize that subconsciously we have actually a lot of holes in our bucket. And so in the elemental balancing program, we identify what those holes are. And evidently, if you're trying to pour water into the top of the bucket and there's holes in the bottom, straight away, the energy is going straight out the bottom, isn't it? The water is going to immediately disperse through the holes. So the first thing to do is to learn what those holes are and to patch up the holes, to mend them so that you have a solid foundation. Once you have that, you can pour the water into the bucket and the water will start to rise. So those are base factors, but what we also have are extension factors, or mental and emotional factors, associated and symbolized in the elemental balancing program as holes in the sides of the bucket. If you can imagine, we've got our bucket here, the base is sorted. If you've got a hole even just an inch on the way up the bucket, yes, the water will begin to rise, but it'll hit that hole straight away, it'll start to pour out. And if we have holes, further up, then it's going to limit how far the water can get, isn't it? So these are mental and emotional factors that we go into in the program. And of course, the end result is that once you identify these holes and clear up the mental emotional factors, clear up the base factors, what you have is a vessel, in other words, a body and mind, that can actually hold energy. And then now you have a very powerful combination between this concept of bringing energy into the system that is really focused upon in the lightning path, and the system, this concept of cultivating the energy or learning to save your energy. So the water rises up the bucket, you end up brimming or being full of energy all the time, and thereby you can function at your best, your body can function at your best, you'll be a vibrant model of health and well-being for the community to be motivated by. And as a result, your emotional state, your mood state will of course be consistently high. You'll be fulfilled, you'll feel empowered, you'll feel driven, you'll be high vibe all the time. So that is, in a nutshell, what this program is about. If you haven't undertaken yet the Lightning Path, I do encourage you to do that first. This is a complementary sister program to that, and yet both programs are very valuable each in their own right. So do follow your intuition and go ahead with whatever you think is going to work for you.